So the car we're here to drive today is a 1994 XJS 4-litre coupe, one of the very last of the XJS. It ran for 21 years. So we're going to go out and find out if it really aged as well as it looks. So how do you go about replacing an iconic car like the Jaguar E-Type? Well, in truth, you don't bother, because it was so recognisable. It achieved such global fame that Jaguar, I think, quite wisely tore up the rule book and decided to replace it with something completely different, not at all derivative at all on the shape of the E-Type. Hence the XJS, introduced in 1975. It was based on the XJ6 Series 1 underpinnings and was to be a grand tourer of the best traditions, a long, relaxed, sporting grand tourer, perfect for the Jaguar's biggest market of the time, of course, North America. So it was introduced in 1975 with a V12 engine, 5.3 litres, and it was just terrible timing, of course, because it came out right at the height of severe concerns about petrol rationing due to conflicts in the Middle East. So it kind of got off to a fairly bad start. In addition to that, there was also further concerns about US legislation ruling out the idea of convertibles. So the car was launched just as a coupe, and we didn't see a soft-top XJS until 1983 with the Cabriolet, and then the full-blown convertible in 1987. It's hard to imagine by the time this XJS came out, the design was nearly 20 years old. I mean, that's quite impressive. And really, there's nothing else like it on the roads come the 1990s. You've got this lovely, long, gorgeous bonnet line. I mean, it just extends for miles, it would seem. It's so distinctive. You've got this lovely raised bonnet line to accommodate that AJ16 engine. This particular example has got the US spec twin headlights. They wouldn't have had these in the UK. It was quite a popular upgrade, supposedly because you can actually get better lighting performance from these twin lights as opposed to the single units that you got on UK cars. And this being the later 93 model year car, you've got the big bumpers. We've got these 5-spoke alloys that also appeared on the last of the line XJ40s. I had a 4-litre S model that had the same wheels, and in fact it was in the same flamenco red paint job. There's not much of a difference to the overall silhouette of the car, except that from the 91 facelift they changed this window graphic here. Now actually there's no more daylight getting into the cabin there. It is literally an exterior change, and you'll see if you look into the cabin and look out, these distinctive buttresses that give it such that unique shape for the XJS. All sorts of rumours as to why they were there originally, possibly to accommodate a mid-engine format. I think that's mostly bunkum, so don't believe any of that. But of course it gives it this lovely dramatic swooping lines down to this tail. These tail lights are from the 91 facelifts, and this is where XJS became XJS with no hyphen. Just such a distinctive, lovely looking shape that just was never replicated. So it's definitely a car you either love or you hate. I think I personally love these gorgeous, elegant lines, and I think they look gorgeous to this very day. What we couldn't have known at the time, of course, that it was a car that almost faced the axe because of disappointing sales come the early 80s, but actually survived that and went on to become a hugely successful car, actually outselling the E-Type that it replaced. Come the early 80s, they spent a bit of work on the V12 engine and turned it into the V12 HE that we know, which is marginally more economical. You still might prefer to have shares in an oil well, but it wasn't as bad as the original cars. And come 83, the 6-cylinder 3.6 AJ6 engine was introduced as the far more sensible choice. Perfectly adequate in power, beautifully smooth and relaxed. That was probably the car to go for. The 3.6 and the 5.3 litre engines persevered until a facelift in 91. And the 91 facelift only really came about because the intended replacement for the XJS was cancelled when Ford took over the company at the back end of '89. The intended replacement, codenamed XJ41, was binned by Ford because it had become too expensive, too complex, and just too heavy, really. It wasn't considered to be the right replacement for the XJS. So everything was put on hold, and they started to work on what would become the XK8, which didn't see the light of day until 1996, of course. And as we've said, this isn't an E-Type rivaling sports car. This was very much a luxury Grand Tourer, and it is sublimely comfortable. It's a lovely riding car. It just feels really special. Yeah, the XJS, it's such a relaxing car to drive. Its ride is supple and compliant, but don't think that means smushy and wallowy, because actually it's not. Jaguar World magazine sponsored the Jaguar Enthusiast Club XJS race series for many years, and if you see an XJS in anger at some of Britain's race circuits, you'll realise that actually it's no slouch. And of course the XJS in the wider world had great success with touring cars and the like. The supple suspension actually means it can stay planted on the road a lot better than if it had a brittle ride. For such a long car, the interior packaging is woeful, it has to be said. It's very, very small in here. Everything feels very sort of hemmed in. You've got this high transmission tunnel, quite a low roof line. You sit very close to the A-pillar here, so the gap between you as the driver and the windscreen, you feel so close. This centre console with its sort of various buttons and switch gear sort of almost scattered at random throughout the fascia showed that things were often a bit of an afterthought. It all works very well, but it definitely looks rather dated come the more modern offerings that you'd have seen come the mid-90s. The 1991 facelift took the AJ6 engine and uprated it to a 4-litre unit. But come this car, we've got the AJ16 engine, which I would say is probably one of the finest Jaguar engines they've ever made. It's suitably refined, it's modern enough to be reliable. You can also work on it from a DIY perspective as well. There's not a lot that a fairly competent DIY mechanic couldn't tackle themselves with this car. And I suppose in many ways that's part of the appeal of something like an XJS once you get to this kind of era. It's technically a mid-90s car by the time you get to this, and yet it's got all that classic charm from the 1970s. That means it's distinctive, and I do think it stood its 21 years very well. It sold in tremendous numbers, and it was still relatively popular right through to the end. I've definitely got a soft spot for the XJS. I was born in 1975 myself, so I'd like to think that all good things came out of that particular year. But I think more than that, as I've grown older, I've become to appreciate the elegance and the grace of the XJS, and perhaps appreciated its much maligned genius. It was not trying to be the sports car chasing E-Type Series 1 that people thought it should have been. No, it sang its own tune, and it's a glorious tune at that.